All right, awesome. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the many Salish peoples who were and continue to be stewards of these lands and waters. And now I will get into a little bit about what Puget Soundkeeper does and start this presentation. All right. So our mission is to protect and enhance the waters of Puget Sound for the health and restoration of the aquatic ecosystems and the communities that depend on them. Puget Soundkeeper is on the water every week, enforcing the Clean Water Act, cleaning up harmful debris, and partnering on solutions for a cleaner sound. We were on the water and on the shore a bit more than usual this past week, which leads me into just a little summary of our week of action. During the week leading up to our Salute the Sound Gala, we held a week of action where our staff and partners hosted 10 extra cleanups ranging from Seattle to Port Townsend to Poulsbo. And we had a variety of shoreline cleanups and kayak patrols. So here is a map of the various cleanups. And it was ranging all throughout Puget Sound. And I'll just share a couple of successes, but we had 132 volunteers, which was really awesome. We had 1,507 pounds of trash, pretty good for 1 week. A lot of these cleanups had a couple hundred pounds of trash, which is really impressive. And in terms of the strangest finds, we found some voodoo dolls pictured at the bottom right over there. And here are some lovely pictures from some of these cleanups. I believe a lot of these pictures are from our Edmonds cleanups. And during all of these cleanups, we continue to find a lot of styrofoam and plastic. And during the kayak patrol that Alyssa and I were actually both on last Wednesday, we continued to find a lot of small pieces of plastic and styrofoam when we were doing our kayak patrol in South Lake Union. And there are a lot of ducks and herons in that area. So as we, and although we only got 7 pounds of trash, most of it was very small pieces of trash like plastic and styrofoam. And so with the passing of legislation, we hope to see less of these items on our cleanups. And so with that, I will turn it over to Alyssa.
Great.
Thanks
so much, Gillian. It turns out that I might have sent the wrong link to some folks today, so I just went ahead and emailed folks. If you get an email later from me sending you a new link, don't worry about it because you made it here. But hopefully, now that I've sent the correct link to some more folks, we'll have some more people that are joining us. Yep, I see some now coming in.
Perfect.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Give me 1 second. Here we go. All right. Now on my screen, it shows that you can see my presentation. If folks can see my presentation, let's go ahead and give this hand raise feature a try. Can you click on your Zoom screen, the raise your hand feature, to let me know if you can see it? All right, I see all hands from my end. Great. So we're going to go ahead and roll forward. So how many people here, and now that you've raised your hands, you can go ahead and lower them. So how many people here like salmon? Whether you like eating them, whether you like seeing them jump and swim in our local streams, or maybe you just enjoy knowing that they're an integral part of our lifeways and the culture here in the Pacific Northwest. Gillian, can you tell me how many people are raising their hands right now? What do you get? Is everybody? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. We have 12.
Only 12 people like salmon. Oh my goodness. Well, I was hoping for a higher count. I personally love salmon, and since a lot of us do, there are a lot of salmon lovers in the room. We're going to talk about salmon for a second. Did you know that in one study, researchers found that here in Washington, salmon had ingested as many as 39 to 91 particles of plastic a day? This is very interesting. Smaller size plastics, microplastics, less than 5 millimeters, are concerning because they're most likely to be consumed by juvenile and adult salmon, whether intentionally because they think it's food or accidentally. From the stomach, these little pieces of plastic can migrate into the fish flesh. We're also finding plastic particles in whales, in people, and throughout our environment, from the bottom of the ocean to the top of the remotest mountains. So whether you're a salmon lover or not, because I can't assume everybody does today, we do know that we need to clean up plastic pollution, as Gillian just talked about some of our cleanup work today. Since we have a global plastic pollution problem and we need to turn off the plastics tap at the source. And a great way to do that is to advocate for plastics policy change. So today's event is the third of 4 Advocacy 101 events that we've hosted since August. And you all can lower your hands if you so choose at this time. And if you couldn't make it to the first event or any of the other events, never fear, that is not a requirement for our conversation today. Please know that throughout this talk today, I'm probably going to say, did you know, or ask other questions. And if I'm going to actually ask you to answer, I will say, use the raise your hand feature on the Zoom to click the button to respond. And then I'll have Gillian take a look and call on some folks who are willing to maybe share, to unmute and share. If I don't say use the raise your hand feature, then I'm probably asking a rhetorical question, and I'll try not to do that much, but sometimes I just throw that in there too to keep people on their toes. All right. So I'm going to give a quick recap of our last events for those who couldn't make it. So at our first event in August, we talked about different strategies to stop plastic pollution. Things like banning harmful products, implementing systems-wide change, and cleaning up plastic pollution. And then we also talked about several policies that Soundkeeper has helped pass here in Washington State. We talked about the plastic bag ban for Washington, which just went into effect on October 1, and a plastics and recycling bill that we passed in 2021 that will also help stop plastic pollution. At our second event, just last month at the end of September, we talked about how the Washington State Legislature works and how a bill becomes a law. We zoomed in on this process, using the Reusable Bag Act as an example, kind of going step by step through the process. As a refresher, the Reusable Bag Act is the law that we just helped pass in 2020. And later today, we're going to talk a little bit about an upcoming policy that we're going to bring, hopefully, in the legislature in 2022, which we also talked about at that meeting. We're going to build on the information that was discussed in our last meetings by zooming out and asking some big picture questions. What is policy all about? Who makes environmental policies on plastic pollution? And who represents me, and how can I engage with them to advocate to stop plastic pollution? That's what we're going to cover today. My goal for today, and maybe it's a stretch, is that everyone's going to be able to leave knowing at least a few of the elected officials that represent you at the state and federal level, and hopefully the local level too, but for sure the state and federal level. And if you don't leave knowing that information, we're going to arm you with the information necessary for you to be able to find them and engage with them. Coming up on November 10th, we're going to have a final event, same time, different Zoom link, and we'll put this information to use. We're going to talk about that EPR policy that we discussed at our meeting in September, and we're going to actually have a live comment writing workshop. All right, so ready to move on forward. What is policy, and what does advocacy really mean? So I'm going to ask if anybody here can define the word policy for me and use the raise your hand feature on your Zoom to indicate if you're willing to put yourself out there and give a quick definition of what you think policy is. Have any takers, Gillian?
Not seeing any yet. Oh, all right, we have one. And Keen, would you like to tell us what policy is?
It should be a set of laws or like bylaws that citizens should comply to follow I guess policy is the initial set of proposal for laws to be set.
Okay.
To be passed.
That sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good. And I can totally see where you're coming with that. So I'm going to show you a different answer. It's a little more broad than we might think, right? Like Keen shared, we think of laws, we think of policies as like regulations that affect us, right? Well, actually, the word policy is defined by good old Oxford Languages, the Google, as a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by a government, party, business, or individual. So it's really more like a course or principle of action. And I've circled it there on the screen to help pop that out because it might be buried a little bit. But it's really more than just regulation, right? Your employer could adopt personnel policies around sick time or vacation time at work. You might adopt a policy to not go on a second date if someone doesn't pick up the tab. You know, or your state, like Washington, might decide it's time to ban single-use plastic bags. Any one of these things is an example of policy. The third kind of policy, banning single-use plastic bags, that's legislative policy, and that's usually what people think of. Regulation, it affects a larger number of the public rather than you know, on the business or individual level. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, when I say advocacy, who here in the room has engaged in advocacy before? And I'm going to ask to use the raise your hand feature if you're willing to share an example of a time you engaged in advocacy, and then we'll have Gillian give a call on someone to give us an answer here.
Cool. I'm seeing a lot of hands. Let's go with Deirdre first.
Yeah, I was involved in supporting the ban on neonicotinoids in the city of Bremerton. As much as we tried to do that, the council, city council was adamant that they wouldn't support it.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for your activism. That is such a great example, and what a good cause. Do we want to call in one more person?
Yeah.
Had a lot of hands.
How about Vicky?
Hi, I need.
Oops.
Oh, looks like you just went on mute.
I was on unmute. I was on mute before. Am I on unmute now?
We can hear you. Yep.
Oh, backwards. Okay. Well, I did go to last year with Soundkeeper down to the Capitol for Advocacy Day. I write letters, I donate, I make phone calls, and every time I'm called on. So
Yeah.
it's not major, but it's a constant thing that I'm always doing. So
that's great, Vicky. Those are so many really good examples. So yeah, exactly like you said, Vicky, advocacy can take many different shapes and forms. Per Alliance for Justice, advocacy is defined as any action. So like Vicky mentioned, calling, or like Deirdre mentioned, lobbying to ban neonicotinoids, which kill bees, right? Any action that speaks in favor of, or recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. So this is so broad. Again, just like policy is really broad, we tend to think of advocacy as being on laws, but that's not necessarily true. On a very granular level, if you've ever argued with your parent when you were a child for more ice cream, or if you've negotiated with a teenager as an adult about why they have to get home by midnight, or if you've tried to get your phone service provider to lower your bill, these are all acts of advocacy, though they're self-advocacy. These are all kind of common things that we might do in our everyday life. But when we really want to change the world for better, when we want to affect policy at the broader level, at a larger scale to help improve our communities, that's when we need to advocate to policy decision makers, whether at the local, state, or federal level, for change. And just kind of like Vicki named a whole bunch of different activities, advocacy isn't just one thing, right? It's community organizing, it's educating legislators, it's educating the public, it's research and preparing papers or articles to inform people about an issue, organizing a rally, nonpartisan voter education on issues, trainings, or of course, contacting your local elected officials, and more. These are just some of the ways that you can advocate for policy change. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. So now we're going to talk about who makes environmental policy on plastic pollution in Washington state and how we can influence them through advocacy. So at the most basic level, back to basics, right? We have 3 branches of government as established by the U.S. Constitution, as you all know: the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. The legislative branch of our government makes the laws, the executive implements and enforces laws, and the judicial evaluates and interprets the laws. Now, all 3 branches create public policy. Courts aren't supposed to be influenced by advocacy. And also today we have pretty limited time to cover a lot of material, so we're not going to talk about executive advocacy either today, which includes agencies because they're part of the executive branch. Today we are going to focus on legislative bodies and legislative advocacy, and we're going to start big picture at the federal level and then narrow down to the local level. Here we go. So at the federal level, the United States Constitution established a bicameral legislature. As we all know, the Congress of today that has a Senate and House of Representatives. And Congress has the power to pass national legislation regulating plastic pollution. Congress's power to pass laws stems from our Constitution and subsequent court decisions. So now our House of Representatives is made up of 435 elected members, divided among the 50 states in proportion to the total population. In Washington state, we have 10 representatives in the House. They serve 2-year terms, and you should be able to see them in the yellow box on this slide here. The Senate is composed of 100 senators, 2 for each state. And unlike the House representatives who serve shorter 2-year terms, senators serve 6-year-long terms that are staggered, so that about 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election every 2 years. There's only 2 senators for Washington state, and that's Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, and you can see them in the purple box here on the screen. And they represent the entire state. So wherever you live, if you're in Washington state, they're your senators. They're in the purple box. Each one of us here today will have 1 representative in the House, and your representative is determined by your district, and that's determined by where your home address is located. So on this slide, we've got a map of these 10 legislative districts. I live on the east side, so my United States senators are Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, and my representative in Congress is Adam Smith, because I'm in the 9th district. And you can see that. I'm not sure if you all can see my little mouse here swirling around on the screen. There's this mauve colored district with a 9. That's the 9th. Adam Smith represents a chunk of the east side, part of the greater Seattle area, parts of Renton, Kent, Des Moines, Burien, and Federal Way, and part of Tacoma. Moving north from District 9, we can see The first district, covering most of Whatcom, Skagit County, and Snohomish County, as well as a pretty good chunk of King County. This is the first district, and the first district, folks, you're going to be represented by Susan Del Bene, which also includes part of the east side. It's kind of this salmon color. If you can't see my cursor on the screen, it's a salmon colored district. Rick Larson represents the second district, which is nestled next to the first district. This includes all of Island and San Juan counties, and then neighboring areas along the mainland, from Bellingham in the north to Linwood in the south. We've got Pramila Jayapal representing the 7th district in yellow. That includes most of Seattle and the surrounding areas, Shoreline, Vashon Island, parts of Normandy Park, parts of Burien. The 6th district over on the peninsula, it's a big one, that's represented by Derek Kilmer, Orca Advocate. It encompasses most of the peninsula and most of the city of Tacoma. Marilyn Strickland represents the 10th, centered on the state capital, Olympia, down here in this pretty mint color near Thurston County. And last, because I've droned on long enough about this map, the 8th district in pale pink is represented by Kim Schreier. That's another big district, including the eastern portions of King and Pierce counties, and then over the Cascades, including Chelan and Kittitas. So now we've covered a lot of the Puget Sound region, 5 of our federal districts, 5 of 10 districts. Looking at this map, how many folks here feel like you can now name 3 of your representatives? And I kind of want to get a sense of how many folks can raise their hand. It's kind of, shouldn't be too tough, right? Because everybody here should know Cantwell and Murray, the senators, right? It's, you only need to figure out your one rep to get this right. We've got 10 folks raising their hands. Gillian, are you still in the room? And if so, can you call out a couple folks to see who their representatives are?
Yeah, let's go with Kristen.
Suzanne Del Bene.
Great.
Nice. Shall we go with Frank?
Derek Kilmer, Patty Murray, Maria Cantwell.
Nice. And let's go with Chen.
I'm Smith as well.
Nice. Should we do a couple more, Alyssa?
I think that's good. I think that's great. We have a smattering of folks from different jurisdictions, which I think is really great. And my goal here is for everybody to leave knowing tonight. So that's why I don't really want to call on more people who are saying they already know. I'm more interested in helping the folks that aren't sure yet. So if you're not sure who represents you, you can go to this website, www.house.gov/representatives/find-your-representative. You input your zip code and poof, it should tell you who your representatives are. And if it doesn't, it might need a little further clarification on your exact address. So once you know who represents you in Congress, I'm going to share a couple of different ways you can engage with them, right? We talked about advocacy and engagement. There's so many different things you can do. You can sign up for your representatives' e-newsletters. This is a great thing to do because you'll get updated news and information from your representatives. You can also research their voting records, follow Google News alerts, set up a Google News alert with their name to find out when they're in the news and why. You can follow and engage with them on social media. There's this great bill tracker that I've got posted on this slide, govtrack.us. You can find bills and policies and track them to find out the likelihood of their passing and opportunities to engage on those bills. Participating in town halls, phone banks too, on issues that you care about, and calling, emailing, or contacting your reps is always a big one. Lobbying is one form of advocacy. So if you're interested in banning plastic bags or banning a harmful pesticide that kills bees, you would probably want to get that opinion out to your elected officials by calling, emailing, or contacting them otherwise, whether it's through a petition or organizing a group of constituents to attend an in-person meeting. So I'm going to ask another question. I see a lot of hands still raised in the room. That's okay. We're going to throw out another question. If you don't know the answer, you can lower your hand, but if you do, you can keep it raised. So this question is, can anyone here think of a piece of federal legislation on plastic pollution? Maybe one that might have been introduced kind of recently. And I'm going to leave it to Gillian to go ahead and call on some of our, maybe just pick one person to see if they know who's raising their hand.
Great. Why don't we do Brandon?
The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act?
Oh, of course Brandon knows. Indeed. Here it is, Break Free from Plastic Pollution. Senator Tom Udall and Representative Alan Lowenthal, New Mexico and California, not here, introduced the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act in 2020 and again in 2021. It's the first comprehensive bill in Congress that would help address the global plastic pollution crisis. It would reduce unnecessary plastic and reform our broken waste management system, because right now we're having a major problem with waste disposal and recycling. It implements system changes, if passed, that Soundkeeper and our partners would really like to see in Washington state as well. So we're actually pushing for a very similar policy, the extended producer responsibility policy at the state level. This legislation, if passed, would shift responsibility for waste management and recycling to manufacturers and producers, so that it's not you, me, and everyone we know, the public, paying for these services. It would set up a national beverage container refund program. It would establish minimum recycled content standards, phase out certain single-use plastic products that aren't recyclable, and more. So if you'd like to advocate for a plastics policy change at the federal level, consider reaching out to your delegates in support of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. And you can also get engaged on their website. Soundkeeper is a supporter and member of that coalition, and they've got a website with different actions that you can take there. Now, Washington state, like Congress, we have our own legislature and the right to pass laws to protect our environment. Here in the state, we have to comply with federal laws and regulations. But the state legislature can also implement additional and stronger protections than those already required by the federal government. So let's talk a little bit about the legislature. Like Congress, our federal legislature, the Washington state legislature is a bicameral body. So we've got Senate, House of Reps. There's 49 members in the Senate and 98 in the House. Unlike Congress, each legislative district is served by one senator and 2 representatives, instead of 2 senators, 1 representative at the federal level, right? So if you've participated in one of our past Advocacy 101 events, and if you were here earlier in the meeting, which some folks weren't because some folks have been joining us late, unfortunately, because we got the wrong link out. So sorry, but so glad you could join us. You would know that in 2020, we helped pass the Reusable Bag Act to ban plastic bags in the state. And that this year we passed another Plastics and Recycling Act that'll help stop plastic pollution from certain expanded polystyrene products and other single-use plastics. And then next year, in 2022, we're going to bring an extended producer responsibility bill, a bill that is a mouthful to say and would do a whole big heap, framed similar to the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that we just talked about at the federal level. It would reform our waste and recycling systems in Washington state. The states have the power to enact more protective laws than federal laws. So we have to meet the baseline requirements of environmental laws like the Clean Water Act that are federal laws, but we can go farther, and we have. Washington state's actually an environmental leader on many environmental issues, and our Water Pollution Control Act has a strong policy favoring the protection of waters. Hopefully our state will continue to be a leader to recover salmon, orca, and the health of Puget Sound, and also to redress environmental injustices caused by a history of toxic pollution that disproportionately affects people of color and low-income communities. So this map, which is snipped from a larger map of the Puget Sound region, it's a snip from a larger, the whole state view, and it's still really small because you can see it's flagging the 49 state legislative districts within the Puget Sound area I was able to snip, and there's quite a few clustered around the sound. So the red numbers on the screen are for our state legislative districts. The big blue numbers are the federal districts that we just talked about 5 minutes ago, right? So we have the federal districts and we've got our state districts called out. So now my state legislative district, because I'm on the east side, which we talked about, I'm in the 9th federal district. My state legislative district is the 41st, and I can't even really see it on here. So, oh, there it is. It's mint colored, and I'm waving my little cursor around it here, and it's a teeny little piece on this map. So I'm represented by Senator Lisa Wellman, Representative Tana Sen, and Representative Mylin Tai. And again, that's because I'm in the 41st. Unlike the federal district map, this is not super helpful to see this map because you won't be able to place necessarily where your address is. You'd have to squint pretty hard. So instead of doing that, we're going to pause and do a live demo. So who here does not know your district and is willing to identify a local landmark near you, whether it's a restaurant or a business or a park, some local landmark near you so you don't have to tell us your private personal address, and we can use that landmark to help you find your district. Can somebody who is willing to engage go ahead and raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, and we'll give it a minute and then we'll have Gillian pick and we'll go ahead and we'll do a live demo, starting with going to Google and giving a search to make sure we have the right address. So.
Right. Let's do Claudia.
Well, I think I'm in District 5, but Liberty High School.
Okay, so it looks like I'm going to do a new share here and we're going to go to Google. Boop, share. And here we are on Google, Liberty High School address. So this is what we would do if we wanted to go ahead and identify. Oh, give me your address. Let's see. Let's try mailing address. Really? It's not going to give it to me? Let's see if we can try a different Google. How about...
You can go to directions and it should give you the address.
Oh, all right. Let's do that. Thank you. All right, perfect. So I'm going to just grab this address and then we're going to go to this website. This is app.leg.wa.gov/district finder. This is a great resource to folks who need to find who their Washington state legislative reps are. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to plug in this address. And hopefully you can't hear my typing too loudly in the background. See, I'm going to delete these. It's okay, so we've got it nice and clean. And, here we go. Find my district. And you're right, we've confirmed. We've got State District 5, where your legislators are Mark Mullet, Bill Ramos, Lisa Callan, and Congressional District 8. So this is a great resource, I hope, Did anybody here know about this before?
Well,
Probably
the
some.
funny thing here is that for me, I'm like right in the border, and that's so
Oh, okay.
close, I can't even tell.
Yeah, you know, they're doing redistricting now too, and it's so interesting because you can see how these districts are just like weird shapes and like just cut out to kind of gerrymander. So you got to be careful and make sure if you're on the border that you know exactly where you fall. It's the same for me with my address. When I type in just my zip code, it says I need to have the exact address because it's split in my zip code. So hopefully now that we've done that little live demo, you all would be able to try that out on your own at home. I'm going to move forward just because looks like we're at about 6:15. So now I should be back to the slideshow. Just like with our federal electeds, we can engage the same way. Newsletters, Google News alerts, town halls, phone banks. A good way to get engaged in phone banks is to join organizations that offer phone banks on issues that matter to you. Sign up for their mailing lists. And I would just highlight that the state bill tracker that we just did the live legislative district finder exercise with Claudia on is here on this slide, app.leg.wa.gov. And I should spell that out for the subtitles, app.leg.wa.gov /BILLINFO/. So, as I mentioned earlier, later this year and in January, we're going to start activating around this extended producer responsibility bill that we're so excited about. I really hope folks here sign up for our November 10 final Advocacy 101 event to do letter writing. And whether or not you do, please stay in tune with us because we're going to host a Clean and Abundant Waters Lobby Day in February. We're going to get to meet these legislators. You're going to get to meet the legislators that represent you that you could have found on that bill or that district finder page. Because folks, you'll meet with your own representatives only. You won't meet with all representatives. It's better if you try to talk to and convince the people who actually represent you in your district because it's much more compelling. So yeah, that's going to come up in February. So now we've talked about national and state levels. We want to roll it on forward so there's time for questions. Getting more granular, there's also opportunities for folks to advocate for plastic policy change at the local level, right? So we started at federal, went to state, now we're at local. And when I talk about local government, that's city, town, and county, and usually that's going to be a county council. In Washington, counties are generally governed by county councils. Cities will usually either have an elected mayor and a city council, or a city council with a council-appointed city manager. So usually you're going to have a council at the city and county level. Now, these are legislative bodies that pass laws, including ordinances and codes that govern our communities. So just like Congress, just like the state legislature, they've got broad authority to regulate and to provide a broad array of municipal services in your community, unless the legislature of the state has expressly denied specific power. So by way of example, most of our municipalities can pass laws about elections, about business regulations, consumer protection, animal control and regulation in the community, health and safety, vehicles and traffic, criminal law, parks and recreation, land use, zoning, environmental protections, like straw bans or plastic bag bans at the municipal level. Broad gamut. So when it comes to stopping plastic pollution, cities, towns, and counties have some authority there. Now, I want to share a second resource beyond the state website that I shared just quickly. It's called Common Cause. It's a watchdog group based in Washington, D.C. with chapters in 35 states. And my understanding that it is nonpartisan and advocates for government reform, which is why I can share it. As a 501c3, we can't engage with partisan political activity, but we can lobby on issues dear to us and share information about nonpartisan resources. So So based on my own address, which I plugged in earlier, this website, Common Cause, Find Your Representative, will not just show you the state and federal reps like the Washington State Legislative page did, but all the way from the top to the bottom. So this will show me the president, the vice president, my 3 congressional representatives, Cantwell, Murray, and governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, auditor, insurance commissioner, lots of folks here lining up. It's telling me all of them, all these elected, and then down to, we've got state senators, state reps, the ones that we talked about just a few minutes ago, Lisa Wallman, Mylyn Tai, Tana Sen, our Supreme Court justices, and scrolling down, getting more and more granular, we've got the county executive, so it starts at the county level here. Dow Constantine is the King County executive. Often counties will have an executive. Got the sheriff, prosecuting attorney, and county council members. They're all here. And when you click these links, it will go to a homepage that gives you more information about them. So it goes all the way down to my city, Bellevue. So I'm just going to click on this as an example. Well, we'll skip that because we're a little close on time. But each one of these links, it's active, it's live, it goes to their page. You can find out more resources. And then ultimately, if you want to track and follow what they're doing, you can do that pretty easily from that resource. So it is so important to get engaged at the community level. While it is important to engage at the state and federal level, this is really where it's closest to home when you're talking about your city and county council members. Know who they are, go to their town halls, sign up for their newsletters, and send them emails because they care about their constituents and are probably more responsive in my experience because it's about community, and they've got less folks that they're representing. So this is where you can really make the most impact. Now we're going to pivot really quickly, and I'm going to spend 1 minute to give everybody a super quick survey. Wow, okay, where is this coming from, right? Didn't expect this today. So folks who have participated in our 3 events are eligible to get a free Octo t-shirt. It's an octopus t-shirt, which is pretty neat. I don't think I have a picture of it in my presentation, unfortunately, but if you check out the chat, Jess or Gillian are going to drop the link to a Google form in there. Go ahead, and if we don't have your mailing address and you are interested in the ability to get our free t-shirt later, click that link, go in, plug in just a few pieces of information, your name, mailing address, and the t-shirt size that you want. And then that way we'll have it on file. And the drawing will be after our November 10 event. Again, it's for folks who are able to participate in all 3 events and send in a comment to their representative. So I'm going to just pause for a second while people might go and check out that survey. Okay, now I'm going to keep rolling forward because we've only got 9 minutes left. So, as we talked about, we are excited about a plastic pollution policy called Extended Producer Responsibility. Next month, on November 10th, we're going to talk in depth about what this means, what it is, what it does, why is it good, and we're going to do an advocacy letter writing workshop. Before we end and go into a Q&A, I will just say Soundkeeper is also a member of a coalition that we helped found called Plastic Free Washington. And right now we have another fun giveaway. If you go to the Facebook page for Plastic Free Washington, the coalition, like and follow the coalition, you will be entered into a chance to win a free bag. I believe it's a $50 coupon for a bag or a bag itself. I can't recall. Don't quote me on the details. It is a bag giveaway, is my understanding. Anyone who just likes and follows the Plastic Free Washington Coalition on Facebook, they have one more bag to give away, and the drawing is going to be Friday, and then they're going to contact folks to let them know who won just in 2 days. So with that, thank you so very much for bearing with me. I would love to hear what you thought about the event today. So we might be sending a follow-up survey to folks by email. In our final few minutes, we'll just do a Q&A. If anyone has any questions or comments or observations that surprised you, or anything else you might want to know that you're willing to do on camera with us today, because remember, we are recording.
We do have a couple questions in the chat, just so you know.
Do you want to read them, Jess, or pick a couple?
Sure. Was somebody saying something though?
Sure. Sorry, it doesn't matter. I was going to ask if Alyssa could see the chat now, but we're all good.
Oh, okay, cool. The first question is about, it says, does our state address shoreline issues related to rising sea levels related to cleaning up flooded properties before debris is released into the Puget Sound and Pacific Ocean coastlines?
Wow, what a great question. So we have a law called the Shoreline Management Act. I'm not an expert on it. And we also have some climate change and sea level rise plans that different municipalities are implementing to help protect against sea level rise issues. Now, when it comes to cleaning up flooded properties before debris is released back into the sound, I don't know. That's a great question. That's one that we might have to look into. I'm not as familiar with the flooding issue, but there are pathways to do that. So in your community, you would probably want to look for your municipality's management plans around flooding. And then I might have to look into that myself to find out a little more. Great question.
And then we have one more, which is, what's the logic of having 2 representatives for one district?
That's a great question. And I think that's just how it was built into our charter, our state charter and our constitution. I don't know why they did it that way. I think, you know, a lot of our government systems were implemented to try to provide checks and balances. So that's my best answer, my best shot at that one. There might be a really good answer for that, by the way, and I just don't know it.
That concludes the questions so far in the chat.
Okay. Well, if no one else has any questions, then be on the lookout for a survey. We'd love to know what you thought about the event tonight, how it could be more meaningful for you, whether you felt like you learned something from this or not. I see Keen has his hand raised.
Yes,
And
once, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Once the law is passed for that plastic law that you mentioned earlier, must all states comply with the law, with the federal law?
If the federal Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act were to pass, then yes, there would be a timeline for implementation and it would apply across the entire country.
Okay, so we don't have to go further if that law is good enough to cover most of the plastic pollution that we are concerned about.
That's a really good question, right? Well, one, does it go far enough for Washington State? And two, is it going to pass? So that's why we're moving forward with the state level bill. Right now, I think there might be a little bit of a uphill battle for it to pass. It might take some time for it to get passed at the federal level. So in the meantime, it would be good to have those state protections in place. Yeah. And I think I see one other one in the chat, which is when will a date be set for Lobby Day? And we will let you know for attendees. If you want to hear updates from us about Lobby Day, we will be in touch. Usually we try to pick a date by, I think, December. There are a couple different factors. There are other groups that do lobby days, and also this year is going to be, or 2022 is going to be a short legislative session. So we're probably going to be doing it in February. I don't know exactly when yet, and TBD by probably December. We should let you know. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope it's been valuable, and I love ending a little bit early to give people some time back. So bye for now.
Thank you.
Ooh, thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah. Hope to see everyone in November 10.